Jesus, thank you. Have we got any breakdancers in the crowd?
That's Dismemberment Plan playing live from Princeton in 1999. Travis Morrison on vocals, Eric Axelson on bass, Joe Easley on drums, and Jason Cattle on keyboard. Though they are playing in a college dorm room in front of a maximum of 30 people with a blown-out speaker, Dismemberment Plan had just released one of the greatest indie rock classics of all time a month earlier. The Dismemberment Plan, or the D-Plan, or the Plan, depending on who you ask, found itself in one of the most thriving indie scenes in America, Washington, D.C. Bands like Fugazi, Rites of Spring, and Minor Threat had paved the way for the post-hardcore scene. Inspired by the intensity of hardcore and the intricate lyricism of emotional hardcore, or emo, the post-hardcore scene was thriving in DC. Dischord Records, founded by Fugazi frontman Ian MacKaye, were pumping out groundbreaking album after groundbreaking album. But the Dismemberment Plan was definitely the black sheep of the DC scene. The snarky pavement-like vocal delivery, irregular time signatures, and aggressive riffs meant the Plan did not have the same household recognition as Fugazi or Jawbox. In fact, they chose DeSoto Records to release their first 4 albums, instead of the DC standard Dischord Records. Not to mention, their first album didn't really sound like anything coming out of DC at the time.
Somebody said it was a bad idea in the first place. Never been that drunk in my life as I got down on my hands and knees and asked her to be my husband, my wife.
It was essentially a math rock orgy with constant time signature changes, beat changes, and jagged guitar lines. They sounded something more like Primus than Fugazi. Survey Says starts with Morrison screaming at the top of his lungs about a rager he had the night beforehand, with a dissonant, twangy guitar in the background. But all of a sudden, the song switches into a melodic indie rock chorus. And that's the kind of songwriting you can expect from Dismemberment Plan's first album, ! But on their second album, Dismemberment Plan is Terrified, it was clear the direction the band was heading in. The songs were much more melodic, the lyricism was much more focused on isolation and anxiety. Songs like This Is the Life and The Ice of Boston showed the 20s-induced anxiety that the Plan would soon become known for.
And when they tell you that you don't know what you're doing now, and when they tell you that you're not the one to live your life.
One could probably say this is where Dismemberment Plan starts to form into an emo-focused band. There are a staggering amount of lyrical similarities to bands like American Football and Captain Jazz. Morrison as a lyricist also improved greatly on this album, gathering momentum towards one of the best indie albums of all time, Emergency and I. Emergency and I is considered to be one of the first dance punk records, and I'd argue the last great emo record of the genre's golden age. The album has a very heavy R&B influence. Songs like The City and Memory Machine are weirdly enough very danceable. This can probably be attributed to DC's go-go scene in the early 60s and 70s, which focused a lot on funk music, which Dismemberment Plan was clearly inspired by. It is also important to note that Morrison had a very eclectic music taste for the time, pulling influences from Led Zeppelin to De La Soul. Morrison also notes that the writing process of Emergency and I mostly came down to him walking into the room and saying, "Guys, check out this riff." Even instrument-wise, Dismemberment Plan were willing to take risks, at least compared to the post-hardcore DC crowd. Emergency and I is full of lovely, quirky instrument choices ranging from synths to a cheap kick drum. The Plan were also not confined by genre when writing this album, and stuck to their out-of-the-box thinking, which is, on its own, very commendable. Of course, you cannot mention this album without focusing on the lyrics. Simple metaphors and stories turn into heart-wrenching lyrics about anxiety, isolation, depression, and alienation. The album kicks off with Lice of Possibilities, a cautionary tale that essentially is the thesis statement for the album. Joe Easley kicks off with a basic drum line, and this uncanny distorted bass line from Eric Axelson. A majority of this album's groove is derived from these two, as they were perfectly in sync and they had both had the unique role of focusing on the rhythm sections for all of the songs in the album. This is where the dance-inspired songs kick in. Morrison's falsetto seems fragile to start off with, and though Morrison admits he isn't the best singer, it sets the tone for the album. The lyrics delve into how a person digs themselves underground, the underground being the obscure music place the Plan identified with. Don't be surprised when you come back up to the surface and people look at you differently or even treat you differently. After all, the person in question avoided outreach from his peers to spend time alone. It is also weirdly apt for the time, where a lot of people spend their time on Reddit or 4chan, God forbid, and then have to interact with the outside world. The back half of the song erupts with this indie rock inspired guitar riff, and then slowly fades into the next song. Memory Machine is a song far ahead of its time. Inspired by the works of Aldous Huxley, in fact Morrison directly mentions him in the song. As mentioned earlier, the song is very much danceable at a 131 BPM despite heavily distorted guitars, a 5/4 time signature, and Morrison's manic vocals. Easley's drumming is also insane, and it makes a big appearance here. The sirens add a level of urgency despite the first lines of the song declaring how great eternal life is, simply for the fact you can get high whenever you want. Morrison laments that eternal life can get relatively lonely, and moves on to one of the catchiest choruses of the album. The time signature actually changes back to the more conventional 4/4 to keep up with the sheer momentum of the track. The Plan hopes for a life where machines simply washes away any pain and suffering one might have in life. This lyric is bolstered by the computer-esque keyboards along with Morrison's proficient, albeit manic guitar work. They even take a stab at religion, claiming that in the end, the only thing that will matter is happiness. A nice sentiment for sure, but Morrison quickly changes his vocal delivery, claiming that wails of ruined lives will be brought to a halt by the serene hum of computers and air-conditioned vaults. If this song reminds you of you constantly checking Facebook or Twitter, it's almost by design, and even though the album was released before 1999. Seeking comfort through technology out of isolation is a theme I believe most people can relate to, especially as the pandemic rages on.
I lost my membership card to the human race, so don't forget the face.
What Do You Want Me to Say, I Love a Magician, and Gyroscope all deal with relationship issues. What Do You Want Me to Say is a bit of a slow burn for the Plan, clocking in around 89 BPM. The song starts with blaring guitar lines and a steady drum beat. Morrison outlines how he can simply not reach his partner and is constantly having trouble communicating with her. Not the most profound Plan song for sure, but the deterioration of the narrator's view of both love and society especially hits home. The guitar and bass really pick up about a quarter of the way in, and this gives the song some kind of propulsion, which I don't think a lot of other Plan songs have.
What do you want me to do to let you know that I do mean it? What do you want me to say? Yeah. Oh, here we go again.
I Love a Magician is probably the most polarizing song on the album. Manic singing, super distorted guitars, balls to the wall drumming, and sexually charged lyrics make for a tough listen for some. But by all means, the song is a bona fide banger. Morrison has fallen madly in love for a girl who couldn't even care less for him. Sticking to the basic metaphors permeating throughout the album, he compares her to a magician who can, quote, make him come in a clap. And I think it's pretty revealing that the first line of the song is, oh, here we go again, implying Morrison has been in this situation before. This is probably the most self-aware song on the album. It knows what it is and sticks to its guns. Even if you aren't crazy about the song itself, it's a pretty ballsy cut to put on the album. Gyroscope, a song in 15/8, if you can believe it, compares two lovers to a spinning gyroscope, constantly afraid of falling out of touch. Both of them go to a party, and Morrison describes their insecurities perfectly. On a depressing note, for a rather upbeat song, Morrison mentions how no gyroscope can spin forever, and someday the relationship will fail. The instrumentals are a little choppy, but there is a gorgeous synth line throughout the track, and the vocal distortion in the back half of the track is pretty interesting as well. Morrison then seemingly mocks himself, saying that it's pretty hard not to be tacky when writing about love. Again, that Stephen Malkmus writing style is coming into full force on this song. The vocal delivery on Girl Clock is also pretty Pavement-esque. The constant stuttering sounds like something off of Wowie Zowie. The disco bass line, the spastic funk of the track is off-putting for some to say the least. It doesn't help that the first line is,
If I don't have sex by the end of the week, I'm going to die.
If you can get past this, you'll find yourself listening to a whirlwind of a song. The song is so balls to the wall, Morrison has to find space to breathe in the middle of the track. The drumming is insane on this song. It is non-stop aggression, and it sounds awesome. The song perfectly encapsulates what it's like to be girl crazy in your 20s. To quote Morrison, "Whether it's day or night, you know it's Girl Clock." But the song is also very tongue-in-cheek too. As the narrator fails to get with the girl, he exclaims, "Was it something I said?" There is a neat little drum solo after the beat slows down, and the guitars spiral into the narrator saying if he doesn't have a nervous breakdown by the end of the week, he would be very, very surprised. The anxiety of this track is very apparent in the last leg, and it shows you how if you don't keep yourself in check, being girl crazy can make you go legit crazy.
These urges can be so very, very misread. Come on, baby, now was it something I said?
Admittedly, the song You Are Invited is one of the more cumbersome songs after a couple listens. Though I have listened to this album over and over again, the song is the one thing I would only really consider a skip. The cheap drum kit they use kind of goes against all the strengths of the plan in my opinion, as Joe Easley is probably one of the best indie drummers of all time. During concerts, you can even see Morrison smirk when the song kicks into high gear. That being said, lyrically the song is very touching. The narrator of the song does a nice thing, and the general theme is that things work out. The producer of this album, Chad Clark, didn't want this song to be on the album, citing that it was way too sentimental. As the song hits just in the middle of the track listing, there's a nice break from the unadulterated energy that the plan brought to the table. In interviews, Morrison notes that Emergency and I cranks every song up to 11, but this would probably be the exception to the rule. That doesn't mean there are some more melancholic songs in the album though. Spider in the Snow, a personal favorite of mine, again uses the basic metaphors, but it hits home hard. Easily the most poetic song on this entire record, Morrison drops quotable line after quotable line. Spider in the Snow deals with the monotony of daily life. People and things can change, but some structure is put into place. There is a beautiful but haunting synth line throughout this entire song, and it adds to the complacency vibe the song has going for it. Easily drops a basic drum beat. Axelson also has some killer bass lines in this as well. Morrison admits he can't remember any of his friends when he was working down at K Street, where a lot of notable lobbying firms are based. I actually used to walk to there quite a bit myself. Taking out the trash on a different day shows the mundane nature of adult life, and Morrison sounds like he's yearning for his college days here. He then compares himself to a spider in the snow, and the guitar line picks up, and the monotone delivery really does pack a punch. Obvious and lonely, a spider in the snow. The chorus is rather uplifting for a line that is rather depressing. The back half of this is near perfect in my opinion. Just showing you the lyrics on screen, because I think they speak for itself. I find the line, "How can the body move at the speed of light and yet find itself in such a rut," perfectly encapsulates the feeling of life as soon as you turn 18. The normal, mundane, Day to day you must deal with persists, but time moves so much faster than it used to. And that is one of the major themes of Emergency and I, just being in your 20s. Everyone goes through changes then, and nearly everyone has some breakthrough or realization in their life, but they struggle to find it at this point in their lives. Emergency and I almost acts as a guiding light in this regard. Think of Ned's Declassified, but for depressed 20-year-olds. Then the album does a 180 and almost mocks itself on the jitters. A seemingly sad song, it starts off with a creepy guitar line and a rising and falling synth. It starts off pretty sincere as well, as Morrison says, no one means what they say, and using a simile to compare them to a deep sea fish. But then right after that, Morrison claims he can do 10,000 push-ups a day, and he no longer likes jokes, clearly mocking the overly depressed 20-year-old who won't better themselves. But this song still strikes a chord. The chorus again mentions the monotony of modern life, as it turns people against one another, moving away from human contact. This song really can make you feel like your skin's crawling with the spidery effect it puts onto its guitars. Morrison, though, on Life of Possibilities, states that this lifestyle is naturally unhealthy, and you move further and further away from people, the more likely they are to move further and further away from you. A great song that manages to both make fun of itself and perfectly describes the powerful effects of depression over someone. The song ends pretty well too. As the cymbal crashes, you can almost feel your body sigh.
Always tired, need a nap. I have to make myself brush my teeth.
Oh, lifestyle world's nukes this morning. Hoping it would kickstart something.
8.5 minutes is about the end of the world. The world's government launches nukes in order to kickstart something. Morrison doesn't really describe why. A danceable beat, the synths are almost made to sound like alarms for the impelling doomsday. Even blowing up the moon is kind of pretty. Again relating to the Life of Possibilities, how people should start digging underground for their own safety. Morrison wonders what people would do in these 8.5 minutes that it would take for the world to blow up.
What were you doing for those 8.5 minutes? What does it mean? Was it petty? Or did you realize you were sorry and that you loved them?
A rocking chorus again, and it has progression and can be a little thought-provoking at times. There was also a clear dance groove as well. Axelson really steps up his game to another level here. On a somber note for a relatively goofy song, Morrison yearns just for people to get it right, just once. A big ask for a relatively simple desire, it seems like, especially in today's trying times. Maybe it's commentary about how people want some utopia and believe that things can be made right, or it's really just about us blowing up the world out of sheer boredom. The City and Back and Forth are probably the best songs on the entire album. Beautiful synth leads, great drumming, and a danceable beat, Morrison writing his best lyrics so far, the plan operates perfectly on these songs. The City being DC for those of you who don't know, is about how Morrison feels so lonely after his girlfriend left him. Everything in the city is barren since he left, and Morrison cannot help but feel a sense of dread. Despite living in the city his entire life, he has never felt less alone. A simple but powerful song, it speaks for itself. The final verse of this song is Morrison wailing into the night sky, saying goodbye to his ex-lover. This is seemingly peak loneliness, but it really does sound good. Back and Forth closes the album, and Morrison says that this is his favorite Plan song. The drumming has been perfect throughout the entirety of the album, but it's probably the best thing about this song, hands down. Axelson is also playing out of his mind here, and it's possibly one of the best rhythm sections I've heard on any song. Morrison sings on a rapid-fire pace and cracks out a pretty cheesy chorus, but after an album full of constant anxiety, it feels pretty rewarding. It is almost as if the Plan is congratulating you on getting here. It is almost as if the Plan turned 30 and was ready to settle down and escape the chaotic DC scene. The glamour and glitz of life can be bittersweet, as hard work often comes at the cost of something. Even though that life can move at the speed of light, it is nice to appreciate that speed sometimes. Even the synths are pretty uplifting. Morrison admits that life is nearly meaningless, but you are able to derive meaning from that meaninglessness. Physics and chemistry may control a universe, but that doesn't stop someone from feeling lonely or missing their girlfriend. You can make the best out of the circumstances the universe gives you, and when most of the album makes you feel powerless, this is a genuine message and should be appreciated by most listeners. Then the song fades out, leaving you just to take in what you just listened to. Emergency and I had little influence outside the DC scene. If you like a lot of Dismemberment Plan, I'd tell you to check out Q and Not You, Farragut, and Black Eyes, but nothing will ever really sound like Dismemberment Plan. Their unique style of dance music, punk and math rock, and emo creates a truly unique listening experience. Even in indie circles, this album does not receive much attention. You see all these topsters of MU core, and many leave out Emergency and I think that's a shame. The 90s were full of indie rock isms that haven't aged particularly well, but Emergency and I has aged beautifully. I think this review by William Morris sums up the album pretty well. The album's lyric book reads better than half the volumes on my bookshelf. Modern R&B should have as much rhythm. Modern rock should have as much balls. Thank you for joining me on this Emergency and I retrospective. I hope you have a great day.
Let's go glitter and it tastes in my mouth so sweet, yet so bitter. We exhaust ourselves trying to get there.